We have some sad news to report tonight from within the Eyewitness News family.
A journalist who worked here for decades has passed away. 2822 Eyewitness News reporter Mark Killer here in studio with a look back at the life of Jerry Baum.
Nick and Candace, Jerry Baum was a jack of all trades who proved his worth immediately after he was hired by WBRE some 6 decades ago. This valued journalist who called northeastern Pennsylvania home left a lasting impression on the area he covered and those who worked with him. At 27 years old, Jerry Baum joined the Eyewitness News team, paired with news anchor Franklin D. Coslett and weather anchor Joe Scott. The year was 1961. Little did he know then, but Baum would become a news reporter on some of the biggest stories in northeastern Pennsylvania history. In 1972, he was pressed into service to report on the Agnes flood that devastated the Wyoming Valley. Just a decade later, he reported on the infamous George Banks mass murder spree in Wilkes-Barre and Jenkins Township. The shootings claimed 13 lives.
The largest grossing picture to ever play the theater was Boys Town, which starred Spencer Tracy and Mickey Rooney.
He also covered the conversion of the old Paramount Theater in downtown Wilkes-Barre into what is now the F.M. Kirby Center for the Performing Arts. Former Eyewitness News photojournalist Mark Albrecht teamed up with Baum on the news beat for several years.
He was one of those guys, never a sick day.
Albrecht got to learn a lot about the man whose looks could be deceiving.
He was the consummate grumpy old man sometimes, and I loved him for it because it was like an act. He was a dear, sweet, thoughtful guy.
I'm Bryant Gumbel.
I'm Jane Pauling.
I'm Jerry Baum.
Sometimes the spotlight was on Baum, or
Kine has fallen through the ice on occasion.
He helped put it on others. And sometimes with enough coaxing, Baum could show his playful side like he did during one Halloween season. News of his passing is tough to take for those who considered him more than just a colleague.
It's sad because he's a friend, but also you know what he meant to the Valley. And how many people, how many lives did he touch, both in the sports world and everything that we'll never know about?
In my opinion, it does mark the end of an era because he was the last of the first.
On a personal note, Jerry and I were part of the inaugural Eyewitness News morning anchor team in 1988, and he loved to talk sports, whether it was about his favorite football team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, or our shared fandom of the New York Mets. And I'll always remember the Mets baby outfit he bought for my son, who was born in 1991, the year before Jerry retired. Funeral arrangements are pending tonight. Our condolences to Jerry's daughter Cindy and all who knew and loved Jerry. Nick and Candace.
Nice tribute, Mark. Thank you.
Extra benefits to the federal SNAP program.
I'm Bryant Gumbel.
I'm Jane Pauling.
I'm Jerry Baum.
Today in 28 Eyewitness News, your morning team for all of northeastern and central Pennsylvania.
Join me for the latest local news, weather and sports at 7:25 and 8:25 during Today.
That's Today for the Stars, for economic forecasts and Willard's weather, weekday mornings at 7.
And I'll keep you informed with the latest news and my complete AccuWeather forecast.
Today in the 28 Eyewitness News team.
Nobody works harder.
For a look back now at the history of the Paramount, here's Jerry Baum.
The theater was built by the Comerford family in 1936. It was to serve as a lasting memorial to M.E. Comerford, who founded the chain of 55 theaters in Pennsylvania and surrounding states. Mr. Comerford suffered a stroke and died in 1939. The architecture of the Comerford, according to its longtime manager Bill Walsh, was many years ahead of its time. The largest grossing picture to ever play the theater was Boys Town, which starred Spencer Tracy and Mickey Rooney. A great picture, a great attraction. But it didn't take a great picture to fill the theater. Every attraction drew hundreds of people to the downtown. 10,000 people were filling sandbags. The rains never stopped. By 11:10, June 23rd, the order came officially to evacuate. At 1:12, the dike at 44 collapsed. Nearly 80,000 people fled to high ground.
There was a horde of people working, helping. Obviously, these people must have been pre-warned or warned during the night or kept their radios on. We didn't. My first warning was a telephone call.
The river was 18 feet above flood stage. 18 inches of rain had fallen. The devastation was beyond comprehension. Damage reached nearly $2 billion. 25,000 homes and apartments were destroyed or badly damaged, but only 6 people had died. Agnes left damage so vast that an infusion of $200 million in federal disaster assistance was approved by Congress almost overnight to head off an economic disaster. Days later, residents were allowed to return to their homes. Agnes left property damage and material loss, but she also left mental scars that today are still not healed. Jerry Baum, Eyewitness News, Wilkes-Barre.
A man who spent many years in northeastern Pennsylvania played an important part in securing federal disaster aid after the flood. Frank Carlucci was working with President Nixon in '72, and today he's President Reagan's national security advisor. Jerry Baum is with Mr. Carlucci right now in downtown Wilkes-Barre. Jerry?
Mr. Carlucci came to the Wyoming Valley as the personal representative of President Nixon to work hand in hand with Congressman Flood and on the civil defense level with General Frank Townend. Mr. Carlucci, what did you think? What did you expect before you got here?
And in downtown Wilkes-Barre today, people gathered to mark the 15th anniversary of Agnes.
Recommends that you always bring a buddy along, carry a staff to test the thickness of the ice, wear a snowmobile suit, and if the ice is black, stay off it. Jerry Baum, Eyewitness News.
Okay, all right, Marco, I'm holding this. So you worked with Jerry, like when you first got here or afterwards?
Jerry was here when I came in the late 70s. He was already on the air. I believe he was a radio man who, like so many, was absorbed into television when it came to be. He is absolutely the only pioneer broadcaster that I can think of right now that was in the earliest days of TV, because even some of our old friends that we know as veterans of TV, whether it was our dear friend Keith and Dave DeCosmo and some of those guys that you look back at, they were all in radio. Jerry was in TV in the earliest days of television in this market.
Right, so he was hired the day before Brian Roach was born. It was August of '61. Yeah, and that always was a joke.
Amazing?
We had a hire list up in the newsroom.
Yeah.
So '61, I'm going to presume that he was TV right from the get-go in '61, right? Or
here, yes, yeah. I think so. But we also had the radio station, so I don't doubt that he did double duty. But he was the sports anchor in those early days. And only people older than you and me in this area would remember it was Jerry Baum, Franklin Coslett, and I screwed that up. Joe Scott. Only people older than me in this valley would remember in the very early pioneer days of broadcasting, it was Jerry Baum, Franklin Coslett, and Joe Scott did the weather.
So in the 80s and even earliest of 90s, I recall you working with him.
Yep. What
was life on the road with Jerry?
Oh my gosh, Jerry was a panic all the time. I mean, he was the consummate grumpy old man sometimes, and I loved him for it because it was like an act. He was a dear, sweet, thoughtful guy that just liked grumbling, you know. And some days my favorite line was like, "Jerry, how you doing?" He'd say, "I feel like," and then fill in the blank, you know. It's like, but he came to work. He was one of those guys, never a sick day. You know, and he went from anchoring sports to working news. And I don't want to say it, but I don't think his heart was ever as much in news as he consummately loved being that rip and read sportscaster with the latest scores. You know, think of the 70s.
So we've lost this pioneer broadcaster, and he was more than a co-worker. He was a friend.
Yep.
The fact that this marks the end of an era.
In my opinion, it does mark the end of an era because he was the last of the first. You know, that group of guys that if you grew up in this valley and TV was so new, well, Jerry was so new too, and you look at some of those pictures, he's just a young guy. And I forget all the history of where he came from, but he raised his daughters here and lived in a very busy street in 40 Fort. I think a lot of people knew where he lived. I mean, there were news cars that I drove for 20 years more after he retired, beeping as they went by.
We were part of that '88 inaugural newscast, and so was Jerry.
That early morning newscast, and honestly, Mark, I know you felt the same way. For me to be working with Jerry Baum, who I grew up with watching on TV, who was a legend, to be in the same green room, makeup room, getting your hair done, ready to go, I mean, just to go out and go live and be next to Jerry Baum. Honestly, I didn't feel, as we did with Keith Martin, that I deserved to be with him on the air, because he was so credible and so experienced. Listen, no one's perfect, but in this business, he was the man back then. You know, I would like to think you and I, moving forward, we're the new Jerry Baums, but I don't know if we can even say that. That's how good he was, you know.
Mark made an excellent point about that he's the last of the first, that he was this pioneer, and now this marks the end of an era. I mean, that we have to say goodbye now to somebody who was our colleague, but Who was our friend, too. We were friendly
Yeah,
with him.
friend, colleague, and to the area and the media business, news business. And I'm not sure, people who have any ties to the Wilkes-Barre area, especially northeastern Pennsylvania, know the name Jerry Baum. They may have to say, okay, where do I know? Oh, I remember him. So yeah, it's a passing, a sad passing. And we've carried on the torch, hopefully with Jerry and Keith and Franklin D. Coslett. But yeah, it's sad because he's a friend, but also you know what he meant to the Valley. And how many lives did he touch, both in the sports world and everything that we'll never know about, So it's something to reflect upon for sure.
The passing of a journalist who made this building his professional home for decades. We remember Jerry Baum.